To the stage as Simon Ward, who'll be chairing our final panel of the afternoon, along with some colleagues, Chris Kane, Esplen, Ronen, Journo, Ken Manke and Colin King. If you could come to the stage, and I'll hand over to Simon. Thanks, Kevin.
Not going to hoot me after that. It's so late. Right, good evening. Last session, bit of energy, please. We're nearly there. So we'd like to finish with a little bit of a call to arms, I think you could call it. You see before you representatives of a small group of CRE and in one or two cases ex-CRE executives who have been passionate that things need to change in our industry for the last couple of years or even more. We've recognized today, time and again, that the Industrial Revolution is over, if we didn't know it already. And we've talked about how the nature of work is fundamentally changing. I think we've talked about how the nature of life is fundamentally changing, actually. So the question is, what are we all going to do about it? In terms of recognizing the need for change, just had that mention, and providing the leadership to make things happen. I'm going to liven you up with we were going to have some voting machines here, but I'm afraid they're not available for some reason, so you're going to have to stick your hands up. And I'd like to ask 3 questions very quickly. Question 1, does the audience agree that seismic changes are taking place in the world of work which will fundamentally impact the way property is consumed and delivered? And the choices are yes, no, or don't know. So who's a yes? I won't bother with the others. Surprise, surprise. Who is better suited, question 2, who is better suited in the organization to drive the cross-functional approach of HR, IT, and workplace/CRE, apart from Paul, of course? And your choices are CRE, HR, IT, or other. So hands up for CRE. Ooh. HR? IT? Just shades it, but other? Could be interesting. We're all out of a job, right? Excellent. And last question, does the typical workplace CRE function focus on, and the choices are cost, the people agenda, or a balance of both? And you can have don't know, I guess, as well. So who thinks cost? People? I think it was just cost shaded that. Balance of both? Okay, it's pretty even. Were there any don't knows? Oh, you're scratching your head. Okay. All right. Okay, that was pretty even. So with that context, can I ask Chris Kane here, immediately on my left, to explain a little bit about what Work2020 is. It's not a Cornet project, it's a movement. Chris.
Good afternoon, everybody. I don't want to be a dinosaur. I think we've heard today about the changes that are taking place not only in business but in life, and the death of the industrial society, and how will this impact workplace, and how will the workplace change, and how. And I've always wanted to ask these questions. I've been asking myself over many years, how do we, as the stewards of the built environment, actually add value to the enterprises we serve and to the society we belong to? How do you, as individuals and all your guys, support your business? For me, and I've been very fortunate to have had the opportunity to get involved in many interesting things over the years, It's all about supporting business transformation. It's no longer about bricks and mortar. And you can see, and I've said it before in other forums, that the CRE executive, the role is such, the clock is ticking. But we've been talking about this for a long time, and there has been a real leadership vacuum both here in this country and globally about how we need to address this issue. Next year marks the 20-year anniversary of a seminal piece of work, which was, for those who have got good memories, was commissioned by an organization known as IDRC. It's an American publication, but it talked about corporate real estate 2000, and it talked about, and let me quote you a few things, moving as property managers responsible for the internal functioning of the real estate of a corporation from being reactive to proactive, from having moving and upskilling from having basic real estate skills to general property management skills, to move from an in-house secretive focus to one based more upon collaboration. So for most of the people in this room today, and for people who have invested in coming to conferences such as this, I would class everybody as being in the upper quartile of being strategic of mindset. But we have to remember that we are in a minority, and the vast majority of the supply side of the property sector still haven't got it, that it needs to be much less fragmented. It needs to be much more focused on serving the business and the true consumers of real estate in all its guises. So if you think about the big picture, we've heard enough evidence today to reinforce that there are some big things challenging our enterprise. The war for talent, it's not going to go away. We've heard an awful lot more evidence this afternoon about the nature of work is fundamentally changing, and you've said it yourselves today. The digital revolution is only going to intensify. You look at the movements towards digital, and sustainable working practices really need to be figured out for once and for all. So that's why a number of us got together and said, how can we show leadership in this respect, in terms of how can we serve our organizations and society in terms of looking at where the best people are and how to get them jobs that they enjoy and are fulfilled and can provide collaborative support in a co-work 21st century environment. And it's how do we contribute to the organization's value chain. It's not about KPIs and square feet per person and ratio working. It's about value and how value create. And that's really, ladies and gentlemen, all about productivity. And fundamentally, we're all in this together.
Chris, thanks very much. So with that as a backdrop in terms of the context, I'm going to ask each of the panel members to comment. Ronen, let's start with you. Ronen from Cisco. So using your technology, your particular technology sector lens, how do you see the future in terms of how CRE teams need to change and evolve over the next, give it easy, 5 to 10 years?
5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing I would recommend we actually do is pause. We all spoke about speed. Everything is coming at us, it's just speed, and we are expected to transact everything so quickly. I think the starting point should be asking ourselves the question, are we ready to deliver cohesive services, solutions to our respective organizations? Have we broken the silos? I think Wendy spoke about that earlier. Is HR and technology and the property facilities people actually truly working together to support one core business? Or are we still in our organizational silos? Now take this further, take it out to the industry here. Are the interior designers, the facilities companies, the catering companies coming together and talking about one agenda, supporting this talented knowledge workers who are looking for mobility? So I think we need to pause and ask ourselves a question about this cohesive offering of solutions to enable work as a starting point. I would say the second thing is, as Chris alluded to, have we truly individually shifted our mindset and the conversation? Some of us still speak about square footage, desks, ratios, efficiency. It's no longer about that. I think we heard from Nuffield earlier. It's about the well-being of the individuals. It's about business output. It's about the value add that collectively we can help these individuals produce. So is this conversation really shifted? Or are we still in our own comfort zones that, where we came from professionally? And I think the final question that I think we all need to ask ourselves in this kind of moment of pausing, and in Cisco it's very difficult to pause. Technology is all around and the speed is there. I think it's, what will be the purpose of property in the next 5 years? Are they going to become obsolete? We all have these business parks. But what is Google doing moving into downtown? So what will be the purpose of property 5 years from now in relation to our organizations, in relation to people, and in relation to the brand and what we want to convey with this physical infrastructure? And I think finally, individually, selfishly, what role are we going to play in this change? Are we going to remain the players, or are we going to become obsolete and have to look for a new profession? So I think the moment of pause is really important.
Cool, thanks. Ken, let me turn to you. You have an HR background, you know, why are you seated up here, and how do you think you can contribute to this challenge and this debate?
I appreciate that, Simon, and I actually ask myself that many times. So unlike a lot of my colleagues here, and actually many of you out there, leading a property, real estate, workplace organization, I don't have 20 years experience. In fact, I'm closer to 20 months. So my background is more supply chain as well as HR. So I characterize it more as general management, but I think that's indicative of where a lot of organizations are going. Because the reality is the person or the type of individual or skill set that generally you want leading an area like that or a function like that, you know, has to focus on a number of things. So understanding the business and how you add value to the business, understand how do you build the right relationships, forge the right relationships in order to advance whatever your respective agenda is, surround yourself with the right talent, complementary talent, whether it's retained in your organization or increasingly with third-party partners to really get the maximum value from that expertise. And last but not least, leverage those three areas to drive change. I mean, it is about speed, it's about change. So I characterize myself much more of a general manager, which I think is a very good complementary aspect to many of us in this space.
And seems to be the way of going from what we were seeing earlier in terms of the voting. Thank you. Colin, you like me have a CRE background, CRE exec background. You're now on the supply side, but why is Work2020 and its agenda important to you?
Yeah, basically I think as CRE executives, we have a wide range of topics that we touch daily. We can influence the agenda of a corporate in numerous ways. But one thing which I think is connected for most CRE executives is actually you have to deliver a very cost-efficient operation. You have to demonstrate that point. But where your real recognition comes to in corporate real estate land, in my view, in my experience, is actually when you get off a cost agenda, when you actually connect with the strategic agenda of the corporate. So the people agenda, for example, where we got a connection with the people agenda of how we attract talent, retain talent, how we actually put job satisfaction through the workplace, how we can actually influence the, engagement with our employees. That strategy around marketing. Are we living the brand values? Are we living the values around the principles, the values of the company? How is that demonstrated in the workplace services that we create and demonstrate? Have we made a connection with the technology that we've heard about during the day? You know, how we would create that a more seamless experience for the consumers? How we've created quality services which improve the lives of our daily lives of our consumers, the visitors, the guests, the employees, making that connection. How we know the connection between the physical space and the third space. And what I believe what Work2020 has tried to do is connect with all of those points and drive an agenda where it demonstrates the value add in our respective organisations.
Perfect, thank you. Finally, Will from Deloitte. Will, your industry and peers have been doing agile and virtual for years. Haven't you got it all taped? Hasn't it all been done?
Well, I'd love to say yes. I think, yes, you're absolutely right. Organisations like us and our competitors already have very mobile populations, but that doesn't mean we've got it all right. But as an industry, we have still got a long way to go. So today and yesterday afternoon have been very interesting to me to listen to some of the triggers around work philosophy. Take the word place out of it, work philosophy. So time and time again, I've heard sort of collaboration, behaviours, connecting people, employee satisfaction, innovation, culture. Culture's been raised a lot. These are all drivers behind what brings an organisation together. I suppose what I haven't heard mentioned a lot today have been 3 or 4 other significant drivers, and I've meant brand. Once or twice it's been mentioned, you just mentioned it, Colin, but not been mentioned really at all in the last few days. So what does a working philosophy mean to the brand of an organisation? The organisation strategy. So what is the strategy of an organisation? Where is it going, and how can it bring its workplace philosophy along with it? And then thirdly, clients. I don't think I've yet heard clients mentioned in all of today or yesterday. So how are we interacting with our clients? What does our working philosophy mean for the way in which we interact with our clients? So I think those are two or three or four really important aspects of how we look at the future of our philosophy. I think what we have heard is that we all agree there's a big change. I think change will continue. It's not new. I think when we start to talk about new ways of working as being old new ways of working will be a sort of step forward. But at the end of the day, I think we're always going to see a need to bring our people together in some way or other. And even if you look at the most forward-thinking virtual organizations, Facebook's been mentioned several times today, they still focus on bringing their people together to collaborate to develop the virtual network. So just there's an irony in that to me. So I think as an industry there are two things we can really do better. One is be better at understanding how to sell the benefits of the alternative to the way we do it today. And the other is to look, winding it all forward, looking at how future designers will be educated. Will they be traditional architects, interior designers? I'm sure they won't. So what does the future of education look like for our future designs?
So here are some of the areas that a very experienced group of CRE execs see as fundamental in terms of needing change going forward. And as a group, we're interested in collaborating with anyone, whether they're in this room today or elsewhere, in terms of trying to lead the fundamental changes that we see necessary in the industry. We set up a Yammer group. We're going to be working on a research agenda. We're going to be holding events. This isn't in any way competing with anybody else as a group. We just want to work with whomever is interested in working with us in terms of driving change that is fundamentally necessary in this industry, given all the things that we've been hearing about how things are going to change going forward, both in the industry and in work generally. So, with that as a backdrop, let me throw it open for questions, observations, thoughts. Anybody?
Hi, I'm John Hinks. I'm from Zurich Insurance, and we ran a futures forum a number of months back. Yep. We ran another forum, this is using the Atiso crowdsourcing mechanism. We ran another forum probably about 2 months ago on the future of the client, and I have to say I agree completely with what I've heard, and I think seismic is the right sort of term from your first question. It seems to me that the industry as a whole, along with the industrialised society is in the West, that is probably at the end of its S-curve, and it's been sustaining itself through all the various techniques that we've been seeing today and reflecting on for the last 20, 30 years. And that can only go on so long, and we're seeing some very clear signals of a disruptive innovation that's coming from lots of different directions. We're calling it a perfect storm, but it's pretty obvious where it's coming from, and it's been coming for a while, and it's probably going to win. I think if we're going to make steps forward, we need to imagine what our future should be before we can start to move to that in a structured way. Otherwise, it simply emerges like it is at the moment. So I think it's a really good idea what you're proposing to do, and I'd like to be involved.
Fantastic, thank you. Any comeback from anybody, or happy to have another member? Terrific. Anyone else? Any other issues you want to pick up on? At the back here.
Hi, Mark Catchell of Herman Miller, but my question's from Twitterland. It's from Bridget Hardy, and she asks, with the Olympics over, what now would be the most useful trigger for advancing new ways of working?
Who wants to take that?
Do we need a trigger?
It appears we did with the Olympics. That certainly moved a few people to think about flexible working.
Well, I think you know, I think some of the triggers have already been here. Maybe they would just gather more momentum, and I think one of them is cost. The other is the fact that technology is much cheaper than it's ever been. It's much more available. And I think employees are beginning to choose, how to work. They're beginning to express their preferences. And something that perhaps 5 years ago, 10 years ago was a taboo topic. If you worked for a bank, you were expected to turn up to the city. If you worked for a legal firm, you were expected to be there. So I think the generation is now willing to say, well, actually, I want to work differently. Do I have to leave my workplace because of that? Technology is here, it's affordable. So I think the triggers are there. Hopefully we'll see them gathering more momentum as we get through this economic cycle.
I think there's another factor there about innovation and creativity. So in a competitive world, being able to distinguish your organisation from the other gives you a reason to look at alternative ways of delivering the service you deliver. So I think that there's a real trigger there. There's always a cost trigger, but I think distinguishing yourself from the next is a real opportunity.
A quick add, natural disasters can be a great thing. I should probably qualify that. I think sometimes, take any geography, a couple weeks ago, certainly Hurricane Sandy, but you could pick it, certainly any geography, any type of natural disaster. But when you have to remove yourself from the physical location that you're in for an extended period of time, if you don't have those alternative ways to get work done, mobility, flexibility, leveraging technology, et cetera, your business will stand still, and you just simply can't afford to do that in a globalized environment. So I think natural disasters is a great reminder of just how important mobility and flexibility actually is.
Perfect. Anyone else? Michael, did you have a question?
Yeah, I guess, would you agree that there's a inevitable sense of frustration from the real estate community? I mean, we've been talking about a lot of the things that you've mentioned for many years, and change hasn't come quick enough well, certainly for me, and I'm sure for you if you're honest about it. So, and we had the question about who should be running real estate, and clearly it's not real estate people, according to the audience.
Yeah.
So, without wishing to sort of paraphrase that, it seems to me we've got the wrong people running real estate inside major organizations, which is causing frustration because things aren't changing. So what are we going to do about it?
Adopt.
Go ahead.
Adopt in terms of if you think about why change doesn't take place, it's in the main because of culture, custom and practice. Yeah. And if you think about sort of what I would describe as my old industry, I would describe myself as a lapsed chartered surveyor because it's no relevance to what I do today. It's really all about how you think about how you best support the business and who your real consumer is. There's a huge disconnect in the entire supply side of clients. Clients in the main are people who invest in property, but people who consume real estate are those people who will drive it. And given that in the 21st century and that the beginning of the millennials are now 28 to 30 years of age, they are now in decision-making points and they can decide where and when they want to work because their bosses will have to agree with it because they're the people who really add value. And it hasn't hit here, but it's very prevalent in North America, the whole co-working phenomena there that hasn't hit here just yet, but it's coming.
Right.
The only thing I'd like to add is I think that traditional surveyors who are hanging on to their jobs as heads of property will become obsolete. I think it's important to evolve rapidly and actually recognize what role you play in relation to your organization. If I look at what I do in a week, we orchestrate, we connect the dots, we have cross-functional discussions. We don't do real estate transactions. We don't clean buildings. We don't do construction. The best people in the market out there do it for us. So the role the internal team plays has evolved radically. I think hanging on to legacy is dangerous. So I think recognizing where the change is taking us, where we need to go, is really critical. But you could argue that in future, anybody with the right interpersonal skills can play our role and do this orchestrating work. Absolutely.
Well done.
No, I agree. I think Chris touched on it earlier on. I think there's a connection with the value chain, right, and understanding where that value chain actually starts. And in my mind, it actually starts with the employee. That's how you attract that talent. organisations are about the people that they employ. That's what their differentiator is. So rather than bricks and mortar. So I think it's the reverse from a traditional real estate approach rather than actually understanding what goes on inside the organisation.
Perfect. Nigel.
Nigel Osen, Workplace Unlimited. Simon, you started the session by asking us whether we thought the realms of workplace would lie with CRE, HR, IT. In itself, that is divisive. I recognise that each of those disciplines have their own skill sets, budgets, agendas. But in terms of workplace, or just work, let's call it, when will we see a truly integrated team that, works together?
Yeah, I did caveat it with other as well, but let me take a risk here. Can I bring you back in, John, in terms of your future stall? Because there was, as I recall it, we spent a lot of time on it, there was a section around integration in there. Can you recall some of the highlights from that module?
Yeah, I recall, this is something that came up with the future of the client part that we ran and sort of went on a deeper dive as well, which was that the integration role was really quite pivotal, but doesn't, as Ronen was saying, it isn't necessarily based around the skills that you conventionally have brought to CRE and FM, and it is more of a general management role. And that as the supply and service provider element of the industry becomes more advanced, and a lot of the R&D that's advanced in the industry appears to be coming through the service providers, then they become the natural part of a single collaboration, if you can create such a thing, in order to deliver that and to turn these, what are currently sustaining innovations, something which that can become individually and collectively a step change. Mm-hmm. But in order to give that some traction with the business, you need somebody who can act as the integrator role, as Ronen's implying. The part of the conference that went down my spine today, and I'm surprised it didn't go down a lot of other people's spine, was Indy's remark, which was, if a CEO wants to come to me directly, that'll be fine, but don't come to me and talk to me about in CRE language, because that's the workaround that is ultimately where we're going to face the death of the industry if we don't adapt to that. And the general management concepts that people are talking about and the value add aspect, that's the integrational purpose. It's not simply to integrate the services to make them recluster them after they've been outsourced and separated. It's to integrate vertically with the business rather than horizontally. And that's the subtle difference, which I'm not sure whether the skill set's here for that yet. But until we've imagined it and got the mindset for it, we'll never get the skill set right, because it'll just be luck.
Yeah.
I think I would also add that if you think about the labels, and maybe I will use Ken as a good living example of this. Ken defies all the traditional labeling attempts. Within our world, we have two sets of Venn diagrams. Within the narrow CRE world, you have asset transaction management, facility management, design, construction management, and there are three very, very different tribes all trying to subscribe to deliver value to a value chain. And then you take it in the wider world of technology and people. Human resources is a dreadful label, but it's about people. And how do you put all these together? And what we're trying to do, and what those of us who are of an age are going to have to adjust, is that most of those are 20th century paradigms. The worker of today, albeit there are 4 generations there at the moment, the younger workers will soon dominate because they will add probably the majority of value. And they have a different way of thinking about it. It'll all be about collaboration, convergence, and co-working. Silos will be at very much 20th century thinking.
Right.
Yeah, I think the other thing I would add is that I think it will be about what services they need. Full stop, right? We need to enable their work. So what services do we in the support functions have to provide to enable that work, wherever it is, however it is?
Any other questions? One down here, I'm sorry, Prima. Yeah.
Just one in the front.
I have more of a comment. First I couldn't figure out what CRE was for the first 20 minutes of this conversation. And now I know, because I welcome them when they're on board. I tend to get young entrepreneurs who, the office manager is running a 100,000 square foot build out, and they don't understand the first thing about how to execute on that. So we become the educator. I think what I've seen in the Valley is that there's a hybrid approach. They incorporate HR. They kind of go cross-section and figure out what the company's about and then execute it. So I see facilities of real estate, or real estate in general, as it's a big part of it because it is an asset. It needs to be understood. And oftentimes when you have someone, the lay, coming in, and you even have, I understand that now a lot of real estate companies are taking that role. So I understand where the consultants are coming in. But I do think there needs to be a point of contact who's ingrained in the company, who understands brand, who understands culture. That is very difficult for someone who doesn't do that every day. And I do think there's that distinction that you guys have, that you do understand how to integrate all those things. It may not be apparent now because it's assets and you're looking at real estate and square footage, but I think now that you understand there's brand, there's a community, there's a culture, there's a workplace. I don't think the built environment will ever go away. I don't think co-working will be the end all. I think it's an option. I think all of these are just options. I think the built environment, you're right, Facebook built 1 million square feet, and yet they have this social network they're trying to create. Why do they need that? Because they need people to be there. They need people to work together. So I don't think it's going away. I think it's just morphing.
Good. Over here.
Hi, Stuart Snelling from BG Group. Chris, to pick up your point on supply chain, do we get the supply chain we deserve?
Ooh.
Of course we do, because we're all in this together. And, you know, I mean, the one thing that irks me is that we have this dreadfully adversarial perspective, certainly here in Britain. It's a different form of game in North America and elsewhere in the world. But for that, from the consumer perspective, it's costly, it's inexpensive, it's very expensive, it's inefficient, and more so, it's not sustainable either in terms of the environment or in terms of the model itself.
Thank you.
Right, I'm going to have to call time there. Thank you very much indeed for your contributions. Thanks to all the panel. Change or die, I think someone said earlier, it might have been you. But I think there's violent agreement in the room. Transformation is with us, and we need to adapt. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Philip. Thank you very much.